back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Richard Lee Tai. He's a connection consultant, podcaster, co-author, associate certified coach with the International Coaching Federation, adjunct instructor, and TEDx speaker. His TEDx talk, How to Find Excuses to Connect, outlines how people can make meaningful connections easier. And his motto is, you never know how any connection can transform your life. And connections can happen anywhere and anytime. So he encourages you to find the excuse to connect. So welcome, Richard. How did you discover your passion or niche?
A phrase I've come across, which is healing the hole in our hearts, in the sense that a lot of our personal struggles, I think, is what ends up informing the type of work that we do. And so in my case, my hole in my heart is that I grew up feeling quite shy and lonely, and there were never any classes on how to make friends, for example. And so I had an experience where I moved from my home city of Calgary to go to University of Lethbridge for school. For those that don't know, it's about like 2.5 hours away. But I didn't know anyone there. And so I did feel very lonely and felt like, was something wrong with me? Because I would see people posting about the events and parties they're going to, and then I'm just sitting home alone, feeling left out. But eventually I did realize it isn't just me that's feeling lonely, and there isn't anything wrong with me. It's just that this topic, I think, is still under discussed and therefore stigmatized. So I'm very passionate about trying to normalize those conversations, because I just think back to how different would my life have been if there was a speaker that had come to my university, or even younger in high school or junior high, just to talk about connection skills and normalizing this topic. I don't think I would have struggled as much. So yeah, healing the hole in my heart. Definitely this has been a healing process to teach and talk about connection, and I think it has impacted lots of other people as well.
I think it's an amazing area that you are covering, because when you talk about some of those skills that aren't covered growing up, like that was never ever a skill that was taught, because you're more focused on like the technical, and I'm using air quotations for those who can't see, skills that you almost lose sight of the importance of being able to build meaningful connections, especially in a leadership context, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for yourself, based on the trajectory of your success, what are some attributes of leaders who have ultimately helped you, whether it's in a way where they've set such a positive example, or in a way where you're like, I would never adopt some of those attributes, and how have they contributed to your success?
When it comes to leadership, one of the TEDx talks that has really influenced me is called Everyday Leadership by Drew Dudley. And in there, he shares a story about lollipop moments. So I'll give a concise version of this. Essentially, he's sharing the story of this girl. It's the first day before she's about to start university, and she's sitting in her hotel room with her parents saying, like, I don't think I'm ready for this. What if I don't fit in? What if this isn't for me? But her parents reassure her, just go to the first day, and if it's really not for you, then yes, we can go back home. And so she's standing in line waiting for registration, and she sees this guy come out with this funny hat and a bucket full of lollipops. It's the TEDx speaker, Drew, and he's welcoming and greeting everyone. And he stops right in front of this girl, and there's this guy standing next to her. And so Drew pulls out this lollipop from his bucket, gives it to the guy, and he says, you need to give this lollipop to the beautiful girl standing right next to you. Embarrassed, but he hands it to the girl, and Drew has this very serious look on his face when she takes it. He says, oh, look at this. It's your daughter's first day away from home, and she's already taking candy from a stranger. And so all around, people start laughing, but it was actually in that moment that she knew that she belonged there, that she wanted to stay. Fast forward a few years, she's about to graduate, and she runs into Drew again and says, hey, Drew, I don't know if you remember this, but on the first day you were handing out lollipops, and you were the reason why I stayed, and you're the reason why I'm graduating today. And so Drew coined this term of lollipop moments to symbolize those times in her life where someone has said or done something that's fundamentally made her life better. Well, this is a power that everyone has, because it just comes down to, in your day-to-day life, how can you create these lollipop moments, these moments of connection and intentionality and creativity? So I really adopted that type of mindset in my everyday life. Like, how can I create these lollipop moments for people? So just as an example, I worked at a university for a little while, and I had purchased some stickers. You know, those stickers that like elementary school teachers would give out to their students of like A+ and gold star. So during exam season, I'd go around and just give it out to students because I'm like, I'm sure adults would probably appreciate those too, which they did. So it's just a little, that pack of stickers maybe cost me $10, but who knows the type of impact it's going to have on those people. So when it comes to leadership, it's like, how can you spark those little moments of joy and connection in your everyday life that are unexpected? Because yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. It's just some intentionality and creativity.
I love that lollipop moment story because just thinking about when you are starting your first day in a campus or you're looking at different campuses and the amount of students that are there, it's very easy to feel not seen in that moment, and it can be very intimidating, especially when you don't have someone to quote unquote latch onto in this very new experience. So, and I love the fact that you did the stickers things because as adults, sometimes we can take ourselves very seriously. So then when you have that
Mm-hmm.
sticker, it's like it's very nostalgic as well, right? For those who it doesn't come as naturally to them to create those moments of meaningful connections, what are some pieces of advice that you would offer to them?
One helpful tool that I've come across is called a fear ladder. And so imagine a ladder with 10 different rungs, and each of the rungs is corresponding to a different level of fear on a scale of 1 to 10. If I told someone, like, just approach a random stranger and start a conversation, for some people, that's going to spark a lot of anxiety. So that might be like an 8 or 9 on their fear ladder. But instead, if I ask people what's their 1 out of 10, what's something that's slightly outside of their comfort zone, but still feels very doable, then that's where you can start. That's where you can practice and develop your social skills and confidence. And it meets you exactly where you're at. 1 out of 10 means texting a friend that they already know and asking to make coffee plans because they know like the chances of being rejected are fairly low. There's already a prior rapport and trust there. For some other people, 1 out of 10 might be just waving and smiling at someone. So, or in my case, the example I give is when you're buying coffee at a coffee shop, the barista, in a way, is sort of obligated anyway to be friendly because they're working customer service. So when they ask you how you're doing, you can ask them back how their day is too. So it is, I think, about exercising those social skills so that it becomes more of a habit. But I think it also comes from having conversations like this just to expose people like there's creative opportunities every single day to make these connections. We just don't necessarily think of it. Just to give you another example, I'd be interested if any of your listeners end up doing this. But the response is you go to, let's say, their Facebook page and type, "Happy birthday, hope you have a lovely day." But what I've taken to doing instead is sending them a voice note, and I will sing them happy birthday because it's a little unexpected. It takes, only extra 1 or 2 minutes of my time. But for the person on the receiving end, they've said, like, oh, that just made my day. It's just that much more special. So I think there's always little ways to surprise people, and that's how it makes more meaningful connection and it's memorable for them.
I think that's so cool because I'm like, I don't think I've ever had anyone like just drop a voice note and sing happy birthday. So I thought that that was very creative of you to
Mm-hmm.
brighten their day that way, right?
Yes.
And even the visual of the fear ladder, I love that because it's like you're kind of getting a feel for their baseline, right? Because there's not going to be a blanketed solution for everyone, especially when all our comfort zones are so different.
Yeah.
So, for yourself, when it comes to the leadership context, what would you say is one of the biggest challenges that people have in adopting this concept? Because when you think about the corporate sense as an example, it's very, very formal, right? And this kind of feels informal and quite like left field for some, right? So yeah, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that piece.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me as a leader, I care primarily about people first because it's humans that form an organization. Of course, tasks and KPIs and all that stuff still needs to get done. But if people are showing up to work unhappy and feeling invisible and not appreciated, then they're not really showing up as their best selves, and they're not likely to be as productive as well. So when it comes to that leadership context, I guess I can make there is a business case to be made that when there is more connection and people feel appreciated and seen, well, it's going to increase retention and it's going to increase productivity. So for people that care more about data, or I guess that perspective, that's what I might say. But for me, it just comes from like a humanity standpoint. It's like people spend most of their days at work, and can it be a fun, supportive, empowering environment? I would hope so. But I'm not as naive to real like it. There's lots of toxic workplaces out there too. I'm very aware, but I do think it's a matter of like, even if it's the way I frame it is like organizational culture is the accumulation of interactions. On a given day, there's dozens of interactions with your clients or coworkers or managers. And are those interactions promoting more connection or disconnection? And can we make these 1% adjustments just to make someone feel a little bit more connected and seen? I have this example. One of my friends is a consultant, and she worked with the school board, who had just purchased some $1 million mental health platform with like online modules and reflections and whatnot. Surprise, the employees did not actually enjoy it. They found it more like a chore and didn't actually increase their wellness. But anyway, she worked with them for the semester, and by the end she had, on her last day she brought in like this fruit basket and all these handwritten cards for the different administrators and staff she was working with. And one of the teachers approached her afterwards and said, in my 20 years of teaching, this is the first time I really feel like I mattered. Which on one hand is heartwarming, on the other hand it's appalling that it's in their 20 years of working, this is the first time they actually felt seen because of this handwritten card. But again, it just goes to show you don't need to spend $1 million on some wellness platform, when really it's how can you bring humanity to work, and seeing people as the holistic beings that they are. And yeah, just people are more than their job titles, and they have more going on than just their work life. And can you be able to be empathetic and compassionate towards that?
And you touch on something key there. When you mentioned humanity, I think that is so big, and how it ties into the emotional intelligence side of the things, the
Mm-hmm.
empathy, right? So as a consultant, when it comes to working with some of your clients, what would you say is one of the biggest challenges they've encountered in creating potentially humanity and meaningful connections within the workplace? Or let's just kind of dive into the consulting work you do and what you've kind of noticed from a trends perspective.
I had the recent fortune to take a course about trust at work with Charles Feltman, and I found it quite insightful because trust, I think, is one of the first things to perhaps break down in a dysfunctional workplace, where people start withholding information or talking behind people's backs and all that. It can quickly downward spiral. But what I learned through this course, and I think would be helpful in this context of connection and humanity in the workplace, is like, how do you build and repair trust? And so, just to give a little overview of the framework I learned, trust can be broken down to these 4 different domains of care, sincerity, reliability, and competence. So care refers to, do you have each other's best interests in mind? Do you care about each other? Sincerity is, do you mean what you say? Are you being honest and having integrity when you say what you say? Reliability is, do you follow through on the commitments that you make? And lastly, competence is, do you have the skills to carry out the commitments that you say you'll take on? And so trust can break down in any of those domains. But what I like about this framework is that it's not binary. Often we say like, oh, you trust that person or you don't trust that person. But this framework gives you the opportunity, is like, oh, actually, our care and sincerity is fine. The main concern is around reliability. Like there's this one time I had delegated this task to someone and they didn't get back on the a timeline we agreed on. So that affected my perception around their reliability. And so that when you have that amount of specificity and around the behavior, then that allows for an actual conversation to try to repair that. Otherwise, I think a lot of times because we're not equipped to have these trust conversations, we just let it fester and assume it's going to fix itself. But it's a negative spiral because once you start distrusting that person, your behavior shifts to where you might start acting more cold and distant from them. And then that person's going to perceive you as like, oh, well, Richard's distrustful too because he seems so cold and closed off to me. And so there's this misconceptions all around because we don't actually address the root issue. So I think having an understanding of trust, and trust is the foundation for any strong relationship in or outside of work, I think is a core component for organizations to look at and have some skill on how to navigate.
That is actually a pretty incredible framework because it, like you said, it's non-binary and it's just a
Mm-hmm.
reminder that it's ongoing, right? And at any moment, any action, any event actually should cause us to kind of go back and be like, okay, so which part of this is that the part that we need to kind of do a root cause analysis for instead
Mm-hmm.
of just brushing over it, because then over time there's actually business implications to productivity, right? Engagement, employee happiness, and all that, right? So, and as a consultant, what would you say is one of your favorite things when it comes to working with some of the leaders, especially like that light bulb moment, right? I'm sure you've had at least one of those. What would you say is your most memorable story that you've had?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have been working with some, because my work has been focusing a lot with universities and colleges. I often deliver presentations to student services staff or like administrators at these universities and colleges. I think I'll just give an example. Actually, I did a presentation 2 days ago, so I'll talk about that. The context of the presentation was that it's the end of the semester. There are some staff that are feeling quite burnt out because their work is challenging, and I think there's still the lingering after effects of the pandemic as well, and all the mental health and challenges and trauma associated with that. But after doing my presentation, I did get some positive comments of like, I love this comment I had gotten. Coming into the presentation, I was a bit skeptical because I've heard talks like this before, and I'm a bit cynical. But I I felt afterwards that no, that this was very actionable and had basically, I guess, relit their fire, their passion for the work that they're doing. Because it can feel like when you're in the day to day grind, sometimes you lose perspective or sense of like, what does my work go towards? Why does this even matter? And so I think I consider that a win. Just to bring back again, it's like we can have compassion fatigue, or like burnout just makes us start to dehumanize ourselves and how we see our coworkers. So I felt very honored that they had that type of reaction. And just to fill you in, like some of the activities we did was, like, for example, to write a letter to yourself. Because people leave relationships when they feel underappreciated. And yet, one of our most important relationships is to ourselves. And sometimes we forget to give ourselves grace and acknowledgement that times are tough. And can you offer yourself some kindness as well? And one other cool activity we did, again, simple but powerful, it's like, can you write a thank you letter to thank someone in your life that has made a big impact on you? And so I got folks to either like send a message to that individual, or read their letter out loud, or in my presentations, I will pick someone as well and I will live call them. So like it's always a surprise for the other person, and it's heartwarming for me because just reading out that letter, I think, is very powerful for other people to know they're appreciated too. So one of the other comments I'd gotten is like, make sure to bring tissues. There's some crying involved, there's some emotions coming up for folks. But yeah, I think just to see it in action and see it doesn't have to be as complicated as people think. So yeah, I receive lots of positive comments from those leaders of like, oh, I can do this too.
Kudos to you. And that is a huge compliment because I think one of the most effective ways that individuals like yourself can make a change in any space that you step into is the practical tools, for one, that you offer, and the second, the space, right? Because we
Mhm.
can get so caught up in our day to day. And I'm sure, especially as administrators and professors and everything, like you guys are going at a million miles an hour up until the semester is completely wrapped up. And then you get a
Mhm.
small breathing room, and then you're back at it at a million miles again, right?
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I love to ask all my guests is when it comes to unleashing the potential of individuals and organizations, what is the first thing that comes to mind for you?
I think it's sort of related to trust. Um, Psychological safety, I think, is quite important because do people have the amount of safety that challenging the status quo is encouraged? Because all it takes is one negative interaction where someone say they wanted to voice a new idea and it was shut down, then that person or immediately now it's encoded into their brain. It's like, oh, that's not how we do things here. I know if I voice again or challenge something, it's not going to be accepted. It's going to be negatively received. So I'm just going to shut up and be quiet. And so already then you're stifling innovation and all these wonderful ideas that people might have on how things can be improved, but they no longer feel safe to actually voice it. So psychological safety, which I think is created with everyone, but especially leaders, I think set the tone of like, is this something that's actually encouraged here? Or do people have to, I guess, stick to a rigid hierarchy of I'm in charge and you just have to follow me, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's quite an important component because I believe that everyone has really great ideas to contribute that will make the organization better. And then just to give, I guess, a case study or business case for this, um, there's this methodology called Kaizen, which is a Japanese term for continual improvement. And it was first implemented or developed at Toyota, so like the car company. And what they encouraged is can they make 1% improvements? And all the employees, like from the front line bottom to all the way to the top, every single month they're encouraged, like, can you generate one new idea that would make a 1% improvement? And it's through that they're able to outcompete their competition because they're always making these little tweaks, and that cumulative effect is that they have really efficient and effective processes. And even to the point where each of those employees have an ideas coach where they will meet with their ideas coach to help formulate, like, what's this idea or what's the proposal that you want to bring forward to the higher ups and to the rest of the team. So again, I think if there's that type of culture, which takes time to develop or to shift if that's not the default, ultimately I think that would make it so that people can truly unleash their individual potential.
Well, thank you for sharing that feedback. And I love that you brought up that Kaizen example because you have these individuals who are at the forefront of everything that's going on. And who better to suggest practical innovations and improvements in everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we slowly wrap up our conversation, I want to then turn it back to you in terms of what's one thing that you're working on right now that you're super excited about?
So I have this crazy idea. I want to send out, or I guess give out 1,000 letters in 2024. And this is the first time I'm sharing it on a podcast, so I'm going to be held accountable now that I'm voicing it to the public. But the project, I'm calling it Project I Thought of You. The phrase I thought of you has been very important or symbolic of connection for me. Because, for example, when I've been on the receiving end, A friend, for example, saw a job posting about community building, and he messaged me and said, "Hey, Richard, when I saw this, you were the first person I thought of. I even know the person that's hiring, and I can put in a good word for you. So let me know if you're interested." So for me to receive that message out of the blue made me feel really special that someone was thinking of me. And I realized we have the opportunity to give that to other people every single day too, to let them know that we're thinking of them and sharing opportunities or resources or connection, just to say like, hey, I saw this and I thought of you. So that's what I'm doing with, that's the why behind my letter project. That's to show that you can think of people every day, and that helps to deepen connections. As for the actual letters, I will send some to people I know, but largely I will mail it out to people I don't know. Because I realize like every organization has their address listed anyway, and most websites have staff listed too. So I could just pick any organization and staff and just mail them a letter and surprise them. It's like, hey, I don't know, like the universe made our paths cross, and I thought of you. And the structure of the letter will be, some positive affirmation and call to action to think of someone else in their life to spread kindness to. And I will number every letter. So like that person will be like number 36 of 1,000 and so on. So yeah, this is a crazy idea I'm embarking on, but still feels very doable as well. But yeah, I'll be working on this throughout the new year, and we'll see what comes out of it.
That's so sweet of you, and I can't wait to hear the outcome and see the outcome on your LinkedIn once you've completed letter 1,000. And I'm curious, why 1,000 out of all the numbers you could have picked out there?
I guess 1,000 is something that stretches me. It's challenging, but it's not impossible. I did do some math today. It was like, okay, how many letters would I need to write per week if there's 52 weeks? So it works out to about around 20 per week. So feels doable, but I also realized it doesn't necessarily just need to be mailing out letters, because one thing, I guess a tip for folks for connection, one thing I do anyway when I go to in-person events or conferences is I carry around a stack of thank you letters so that if I see a speaker or some other attendee that really stands out to me, I will write them a handwritten note to say like, wow, I loved your speech, or when you said this really resonated with me. And I will give it to that person before I leave the event. And oftentimes people say, I've never received anything like this before, and it's very meaningful to them. So again, I would count that as part of my 1,000 letter project too. So it helps to build the habit of seeing connection and opportunities for connection in your daily life. So whether it's at an event or I'm at a coffee shop or grocery store or whatever, I can write letters to these people too.
That is actually a very beautiful gesture, because I think about when you're at a networking event, it's very hard to stand out, right? Most times, unless if you're the speaker, it's very rare that you'll stand out as an attendee.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you actually write a thank you letter on the spot, because a lot of us don't actually write letters these days, right? Even Christmas cards are digital these days, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I think is amazing. And then on top of it, it's those individuals that are on the front line working at the grocery stores, at the coffee shops, whatever it may be. They are not used to receiving kindness. They're probably more used to receiving complaints, right? When that
Mm-hmm.
comes up. So I think you're restoring humanity one letter at a time and one meaningful connection at a time. So thank you so much for sharing your stories, the business cases, the tips that you did today. And to everyone else, thank you for tuning into another episode. I so appreciate your time and your energy, and your support means more than you'll ever know. Till next time, stay safe.